The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome, everybody. Keefer and Kurre is on the air on TKR. I'm Kip Keefer. He's Tony Kurre. We get together once a week and talk about a variety of subjects. Folks, to be perfectly candid and honest, when we first started this show, Tony and I would kick around ideas, and he'd say, well, what do you think about doing this? And I'll say, yeah, I think that'd be pretty good. We've gotten completely away from that.
No, well, a couple times, and it's usually our best shows, is when you and I just start talking and we just record it. I mean, we just let it rip, and that's what podcasts are sometimes. So sometimes it's good not to have, good to have a menu. So, and I'm hoping that's kind of the route we go today.
So welcome to the formula that has been applied now is standard operating procedure, because a lot of times Tony will say, you got anything you want to talk about? And I said, not really. He goes, I'll come up with something. But we don't talk about it. We're not prepared for it. But I know Tony's got a lot of knowledge on this subject, so I never really worry about how he's going to respond, and I think it's a mutual thing. But Tony, I am outraged of something that I dearly love and devote so much of my time and attention to. I've got a television program with you on ABC 3340 here in Birmingham called The Starting Lineup. Mm-hmm. I've got two programs where I get up really early on Saturday and Sunday morning to do on Jocks 94.5, the Kip and Terry Game Time on Saturday, and the morning after in our 8th season on Sunday. And it's
by the way, that's from the studio at Cumulus, correct? You drive up to and just want to let people know. You know, during COVID, everyone got their own stuff. And so everyone you hear, about 99% of the shows are from their own home, from their bedrooms, from their own studios. Kip is the man. And I love this because I do the same thing. There's nothing like doing real radio from a radio station. It's different. You get to take phone calls. You have a producer. You have the whole 9 yards. So kudos to you for going up there. I know it's early on a Saturday and Sunday morning, but you get it done. That's the way radio should be done. Continue.
Well, to be fully disclosed, I do have a home studio now, so I don't do it every time, but every time I get the chance, I want to be in the studio at Cumulus, and so that goes on. But the point is, Tony, to do these kind of programs and have the expertise because I can tell you as a long time, and I go back to when sports radio was first invented, and it really started with some shows that were on late nights, and Scott Farrell was probably the first nationally syndicate. Farrell on the bench, you know.
Yeah. You used to have some pretty good picks, pretty good handicapper there for a while.
Yeah, and he had that raspy voice, and he was just kind of a nutty guy. But Farrell on the bench was a big deal, you know.
Yep.
And then Jim Rome, of course, took it to another level with "Have a Take, Don't Suck." But at the same time, right here in Birmingham, Herb Winches had a dream. Our man, the Winch Cinch, went to Dick Broadcasting, which had what is now the Cumulus stations, and convinced them to take the old signal on 690 to all sports radio, and they scoffed at all sports 24 hours a day. Are you kidding? Yep. But so Birmingham was one of the real initial sites that had that format. So I only point all that out because I've been a sports radio junkie my whole life, and now to participate in it for so long, I really take it seriously. And here we have the first expanded college football playoff, and it's a great concept. It gets us into a position where, with just the 4-team playoff, last year it was mired in controversy. The Florida State fans still can't let it go, despite going 2-10 this year. You know, I even hear people saying ridiculous things like, well, Florida State got kicked out of the playoff last year because their quarterback got hurt. What about Georgia? Well, you know, it was a little different circumstance. You only had 4 teams. Nobody was guaranteed anything. And you had 5 conference winners. Not all 5 could go. Travis got hurt. Jordan Travis got hurt with 3 games left in the season, and they limped to the finish line and did finish undefeated. But this is a Georgia team that won the SEC, beat Texas in the championship game, lost their quarterback at halftime, but gained 260 more yards in the second half with the backup guy.
Well, so, if I had told you before the season that FSU is coming off an undefeated season, their preseason number 10, the ACC representatives were going to be SMU and Clemson backing in after they lose to South Carolina, you would have said, "I'll take FSU's schedule all year long."
Absolutely. Yeah. So so anyway, the point is, all of these opinions that fly around pale in comparison of stupidity to what this committee did during this process. And Tony, I wanted to talk to you today and get your thoughts on the things that I have been really stressing in these last couple of days, and I really pounded on the radio this weekend. First of all, for this committee to fly to Dallas, Texas, starting the first Monday, or actually they come in on Thursday. So for the November 5th week of football, they've been coming to us for 6 straight weeks with their rankings from Dallas. What is the purpose of flying these 13 people, 8 of them who are active athletic directors, who, it's one of my beefs, they're not football experts. They're bureaucrats. They're fundraisers. They're just office people. They fly these people, put them up in a 5-star resort, feed them filet and lobster and Dom Perignon, and they give their rankings, fly home, and come right back the next Thursday for 6 weeks. That's stupid to start with. But they really just mail it in. They don't do anything. The rankings don't mean anything until the very last ones. And ranking-wise, there was a couple things I didn't like, but people need to understand. And I don't think this story has been told, and it's the first place I'd like to start with you. They rank the teams 1 through 25, the top 25 teams in the country. Of course, there's only 12 playoff spots, but the rankings are completely different than what we're going to see in this tournament. The seedings in March Madness, the NCAA basketball tournament, you have 4 of these brackets with 16 teams. Nobody gets a bye. The number 1 team plays the number 16 team, and so on. In this situation, because they're protecting the cash cow conference championship games that make a shitload of money, and are great visuals for the conference, to protect them, they put in this bye crap and the seedings. So right now in this tournament, you've got the 3 and 4 seeds, and let me tell you about Boise, who won the Mountain West. They had a great year. They had the runner-up in the Heisman Trophy.
Should have won the Heisman Trophy, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's a joke too.
That's another scandalous slap in the face, because this guy did things statistically that nobody's done. Of course, Travis Hunter also played 470 more plays than anybody in the country.
He played both sides of the ball his entire life, and all of a sudden
really
they do it in college. All of a sudden they do it in college, and they think it's special. I mean, the dude was a 2-way player his entire high school career, and I realize kids do that all the time. But all of a sudden, just because you play both sides of the ball, this is not Ohtani in college football. It's not the same thing. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah. So Boise is the number 9 ranked team in the final ranking by this committee, Tony, but they're the number 3 seed because they're a conference champion, not one of the power conference champions, but they have been asserted in the 3 seed. And you might say, well, why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because not only do they get a bye, but they're the 9th ranked team in the tournament out of 12. And guess what Las Vegas thinks, who's not involved in this process, by the way? Who would you want picking the teams for this if you could pick anybody in the world that was knowledgeable and non-biased about what teams and where they're going to be ranked? Las Vegas right now, Tony, has Boise State as the longest shot of the 12 teams to win the college football playoff, plus 6,000. 6,000, which means they're 600 to 1. Yep. You bet $2, you get $1,200 back if you bet them. So the longest shot in the field has a first round bye and is the number 3 seed. That's the first nonsense to point out. What's your reaction to that?
No, I totally agree with you, and I think listen, it's our first year. We're gonna have to work some things out, and I have no doubt that things are going to change in 2026. They're going to have to because the reseeding process. First of all, the bye games. I actually thought that maybe we were going to go to a 16 playoff and then have the top two teams actually have byes because I was trying to figure out a way because like these conference championships, you had to have a conference championship be represented in the playoffs. They figured that out. I really don't know why because what ended up happening is we had more teams that didn't play in their own conference championship getting into the playoff that did play and lost. So we're penalizing those teams for playing the next team. I get that. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. And again, you got Clemson, who's not even the top 12 in the polls, and there they are, being seated in the top 12. I understand that. I get that. I think they're going to have to do some type of reseeding process where they're going to have to change things up. I don't like when they reseed after they start playing, much like
I don't like that either.
I don't like that as well. I like your seed and you go with it. But that's certainly, and the one thing that I think they did a great job at that I thought was really cool was the home field game in the playoffs. But even there, it didn't work out. You got some teams getting home field games that, quite frankly, shouldn't be getting home field. But
I mean, agree.
Penn State's got the easiest road to go, and they haven't done squat. They haven't played anybody this year.
That's for sure. You brought up Clemson. Clemson was the number 17 ranked team going into that championship weekend. They got into the ACC after losing to South Carolina that same Saturday and walked off the field saying, okay, well, we're completely out of it. We're not in the ACC championship. We're not going to be in the playoff. But meanwhile, wait, up in Syracuse, Miami had a 21-0 lead and blew it and lost, which mathematically put Clemson in the ACC championship. Dabo Swinney and the Tigers, to their credit, won that game and got an automatic berth as the ACC champion. But the committee was so impressed, Tony. So explain this to me. The committee was so impressed with Clemson's big win over SMU, they moved them from 17th in the rankings to 16th. They moved up one spot. Meanwhile, SMU, who lost to a team that was 8 places below them in the rankings going into the championship week, SMU played such a gallant game and played with such great fervor, and they had such heart comeback against the team that the committee's basically saying is not very good, and they get propelled into the playoff based on losing the I thought wins and losses meant something. And when you're the favorite and you lose to a team that they have so little regard for, they move them up one spot for upsetting the number 8 team in their poll and winning a conference championship. That just tells you how ridiculous the whole thing is also. And I got more.
Well, I think, I try to be, this is an unprecedented situation. It's the first time we've had this 12-team playoff. A lot of people thought, great, now the teams that surely should be in or have an outside shot, if they end up playing a perfect, 60 minutes of football, they should have a shot to go in. It's a little like March Madness, but they got some things they got to play out. And I got to look back and look at Rich Clark and some of the guys who obviously are part of this committee. If I hear it one more time, I'm going to lose my brain. We watch the games. You're supposed to watch the games. Why do they say it every single week? They say, well, we watch the games. It's like, why are you telling me you're watching the games? Ladies and gentlemen, if that was the case, I'd put Keefer on that committee well before I'd put anyone else on that committee, because I know for a fact that you watch more college football than anyone else. You've got eyeballs on the TV. I do as well. And so for whatever it's worth, I've always thought it was a lot like this, when they had the committee before. It's upper us. It's anti or old athletic directors, some guys that are, sitting in their Massachusetts mansions,
former coaches in their 70s,
eating their crab legs, enjoying their retirement, saying, yeah, we'd like to give you a little pie here for 3 years. We're going to let you be in the committee. I get that. But you ask most people on the last committee, they don't want to be on the committee. They're like, what?
If you have a real job and a life, you don't want to be.
Exactly.
So, but have they not heard of Zoom, Tony?
No.
I can see bringing them all in for the big final decision and all that. But the 6 weeks prior, can they not meet via Zoom? Why do we have to feed them steak and lobster and Dom Perignon in Dallas to come hang around? It's just ridiculous.
They got their own NIL deals. Here's the situation too. Is first of all, we have to make it look first class. It's college football. This is an enterprise. It's a business now. Everyone's getting
It's
paid. So
all
we
about
have to,
the money.
you know what? I mean, let's be honest here. If you've got something going at the Birmingham Racecourse Casino, right? And you're having a big executive meeting, you're not doing a Zoom meeting. They're flying Kip Keefer out to Las Vegas, right? Because that's where the mecca is. That's where ground zero is. And so you have to have, it's kind of like what they used to do with our morning show. Whenever Alabama played a national title game, they played in so many national title games, they kept sending us every single year to the point where the last couple of years, we didn't go. And people are like, wait a minute, you get the number one sports station, number one sports team in the country, and you guys aren't even going to go down to Miami, or you're not going to go to Rose Bowl to watch Alabama play in the national title because our owners were too damn cheap to send us. It's the image, it's the likeness. It's one of those things where it has to look good for the college football committee. It has to look good for them to be together, first of all, to recuse themselves, second of all, and the third of all, get the vote right. I will say this. I'm still surprised that they took SMU over Alabama, only because Alabama is a blue blood. I think the playoffs are better with Alabama in it. Whether you like them or hate them, they do bring a lot of polarization to college football. Brand. And on any given weekend, Alabama could beat anyone. I can't say that about SMU. So I will give them a little credit. I can either give them credit or I can tell them they're idiots.
Yeah.
For stepping out of line a little bit, because even Vegas didn't think that SMU was going to get in, and they did, which was a little bit of a surprise. And I would have liked to have been a fly in the wall when they were discussing that last guy, because that was the only spot that really needed to be discussed. For the most part, things worked themselves out. We say this all the time. We love chaos 2 or 3 weeks prior to the season. Clemson had to have like 15 different things happen. They had to have Pittsburgh to lose 2 of the last 3 games. Miami needed to lose a Syracuse. I mean, all these needed, and of course it happened. It happens. But for the most part, it does seem to take care of itself. And now you've got like a Georgia who almost didn't make it in as the second highest ranked team to get in and actually play for a national title. Oregon certainly in the mix there, to Ohio State as well. And I fully expect that we'll see that as well. Does Boise State have a shot 600-1?
6,000. Well, 600. Yeah. They're plus 6,000. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The longest shot in the race.
Much like I had the UAB Blazers minus 3.5 last night. With 18 minutes and 24 seconds left, they had a 99.7% shot of winning that basketball game because they were up by 27. They lost by 9.
No way.
You never know what's going to happen. That's why you play the game. That's why you play the game. The third biggest comeback in NCAA basketball history last night. I saw it live at Bartow Arena. I still don't believe what I saw last night. So you never know what's going to happen. Teams are going to play the games. We're going to see if it plays out. With that being said, though, I am super excited. It's almost like 2 bowl seasons. It's like having a second bowl season. I'm super excited about the format. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, the committee, I don't know if anybody really on that committee could do. Let me ask you this. Assuming we lock them in a hotel room and we make them watch, and we know that they're unequivocally watching the games, could they have done anything different that would have earned you respect? Or is it just the fact that it's a bunch of no-names trying to tell us who should make the playoffs?
Well, I mean, again, from the ranking standpoint, there's some minor changes I'd make, but I don't really have a problem with the rankings. The problem is what they were fed in terms of how they had to structure this thing by, again, the whole point of it was to protect the conference championship games because they're a big cash cow. But Tony, they've got the best example in the world. You don't see in the NCAA basketball tournament the top 4 seeds getting to take the first weekend off. Yep. That's ridiculous. Your reward for winning your conference or being the best team is a high seed. So you're going to play somebody that's not very highly thought of. And so let me just run this by you. Yep. I took the same formula. It should have been a 16-team playoff because that's what's the 16-team brackets in college basketball work beautifully. You get upsets, you get drama. But let me tell you, we know what the slate of games is this week and the games that we have to deal with. Probably the only one that's even interesting is Tennessee and Ohio State. The other ones are questionable. But if we just would have used the tried and true formula of the NCAA basketball tournament, let me tell you what the 8 games this weekend on the opening weekend would have been. It would have been Oregon #1 against number 16 Clemson. Mm-hmm. It would have been Georgia #2 against number 15 South Carolina. It would have been number 3 Texas against number. Let's see, my
number 14.
I took my glass off. Yeah, number 14, Ole Miss. I was wondering why I couldn't see. So it would have been Texas Ole Miss. That would have been a hell of a game.
Yep.
Number 3 against number 14. Number 4, Penn State against Miami. Number 5, Notre Dame. They would have lined up and played this weekend against Arizona State, champion of the Big 12, in a 5-12 matchup, which, in basketball, 5-12s always yield upsets. Number 6, Ohio State. They would have been welcoming the Alabama Crimson Tide, number 11, this weekend. That would have been pretty much fun.
Yep.
Ohio State, Alabama. Then you also had, of course, the next one in line, Tennessee. They would have had SMU. Boise State would have played Indiana, and that would have rounded out the first round. There are some awesome games in that setup, a lot better than what we have, by having to seed the 12th ranked team in the whole deal, the number 12 Arizona State, and of course having to take Boise, who was number 9 at the end, and put them in a bye situation as the number 3 seed. It makes the whole thing ridiculous, and here's why. If you're Oregon today, Tony, if I'm the Oregon Ducks, I am so incensed, because Oregon is the only undefeated team. They are the completely, everybody agrees, number 1 team. You know what their reward is? If for their first game, they get the winner of the Ohio State-Tennessee game.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2 of the higher ranked teams in the whole tournament.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Texas is number 5. Texas hosts in the first game Clemson, who's the lowest ranked team in the whole deal. And if Texas wins, they go to Atlanta and play Arizona State, the next lowest team. So at Oregon, you don't want to be saying we're number 1. You're wishing you could say we're number 5.
Mm-hmm. No, there's no doubt.
It's just absurd.
And that's the first time I've heard the 16-team playoff or the way you did it, man. I love that. Maybe it's just because those 5-12s, and I think about those 6-11s. I think of those matchups, and it gets me all fired up. By the way, March Madness.
That system works.
Yeah. By the way, March Madness, they announced yesterday, by the way, it looks like it's going to 72 or 76 teams by next season, which will be a lot of fun. I know a lot of people think it should just be doubled. They should just go ahead, but they're saying they don't have enough time in the schedule to add another game. Whatever. No, I mean, again, it's some years it's going to work out, some years it's not. It's unfortunate because, you also have a lot of college football teams that, quite frankly, and Oregon, I think, was the most consistent team. Yeah, they beat Wisconsin by 3. They beat Ohio State by 1 at the shoe. They did everything possible. A lot of people thought they got by the skin of their teeth. I didn't see that they won by 20 in most games, more games by 20 than any other team in the 12-team playoff. And so I think they should have their best shot. But I'm also about, listen, you got to win your games, right? And the one thing about March Madness, which I like, because you're talking about playing 6 games, 7 games if you have to play a playing game. That's a lot more than 2 or 3 ball games in a college football season. And so, you've got easier roads. You got roads where you're playing much closer to home. I get that. I don't really know if that plays much into it a whole lot. But, I mean, for an Oregon squad, it does look like they got screwed. For a Texas squad that was pretty consistent for the most part for this whole season, look out for this Clemson Tigers. You got a guy that's won a couple national titles on the other sideline. That should be an interesting matchup, too. Let me ask you this, since we're talking about this. Upsets. Do you see anything right off the bat? I mean, is there anything? We talked about Notre Dame and Indiana. If you listen to K4 Wins, our brand new podcast, which we did last Friday, it's fantastic. K4 Wins. Check that out on the Tony Kurre Radio podcast. You can hear it and see it wherever on our YouTube channel, K4 Wins, also K4Wins.com if you want to get our plays. And we give you all of our plays. We're going to be doing several new shows throughout the football season. We talk about Indiana, Notre Dame, which I think is interesting. SMU, Penn State, I think, is another game where I think a lot of people are going to be rooting for SMU, but Penn State, they're getting by for whatever reason, it seems like. And then you got the Clemson Tigers, a 10-point dog to the Texas Longhorns. Would not surprise me at all to see Clemson win that football game.
Yeah, because I've been kind of thinking Texas all year. Texas is like a new car. It looks great. Texas looks great, but you fire up the engine, you start driving it a little, and it's not.
It pings
it's
a little
sputter.
bit.
Exactly. There's just something not quite right with that team, and you can Texas fans, my partner Terry Quillian down in Dallas is telling me that Texas fans are blaming the refs and they called holding on them repeatedly in the first half. Well, that's because Georgia basically whipped their butt in Austin, and the offensive line had to resort to whatever tactics necessary to keep Quinn Ewers on his feet. So, it tells me that a team is not very well coached if they're making the kind of destructive mistakes that kill them. And they're just not a very high explosive offense, despite the fact they've got a huge offensive line, experienced quarterbacks, unbelievable skill players. There's just something not quite right with that
Something
team.
is not right. You know what? I think a lot of it plays into Quentin Ewers because, I mean, he went in as the Heisman Trophy hopeful going into the season. A lot of people talked about him. And then next thing you know, he's getting benched. He's getting banged up. He comes back. And then the Manning gets in. Yeah, the one thing that I think is amazing, there hasn't been that much of a fall off at all between quarterbacks number 1, number 2, which is weird because at the beginning of the season, if you told me that Quentin was going to get banged up, I would have taken at Texas and thrown them out. But the one thing that's keeping them in, championships are won by defenses. Their defense is playing. I mean, it's not the greatest defense in the world, but I mean, if you look at what they've given up point-wise, they've played really, really well. When you outgain someone by 170 yards in the first quarter and you're only winning 6-0, you're begging to be beaten. That's exactly what happened to the Bulldogs.
They completely, I mean, you've never seen a game where they dominated a team like they did Texas A&M in front of those 110,000 lunatics down there, and they completely quieted the crowd. But Tony, they only won the game 17-7. That was a game that could have been 41-0. I mean, they just completely dominated that game. They had a punt block, they had a pick six for a touchdown, and their offense could not score in the red zone. Their kicker even missed a couple of kicks, which he did also against Georgia. So there's just something not quite right with that team, and I really don't know how to put my finger on it. I'll tell you this. Some people that are close friends with Terry have told her down there, I can't wait till we get Quinn Ewers out of here. This was the most ballyhooed quarterback in the country coming in, and now they're ready to run him out of town on a rail.
Well, there are a lot of people kind of feel like about Klubnik too, as well, with the Clemson Tigers.
Another Texas.
They're like, are you sure you're not a senior? Are you sure you're not a senior? Because I thought you were a senior for sure. No, he is not. He's doing just enough. He'll rip up a 54-yarder coming up in his first game, and everyone will forgive him for at least a quarter or two. But whatever reason, he always makes at least 1 or 2 mistakes. I'm telling you right now, you've heard us right here. It's going to come down to a pick in that ball game. It's going to be a pick 6 in the Texas-Clemson game. I think it's going to be within a score, but someone's going to make a bad throw. Something's going to happen whether Texas is going to turn Clemson over or Klubnik's going to be throwing a stupid pass over the middle like he always does. He loves to throw across the grain. It bites him in the ass every single time he does it, and it'll lose a game for Clemson. But I think it's going to come down to one possession game. There'll be turnovers for sure.
Well, I usually am featured on the K4 podcast, but I was goofing off in New Orleans this week, so I missed it.
We'll get you on this week.
Tell folks what your guys' collective take was. I'm interested to hear about Notre Dame, Indiana.
Yeah, for the most part, everyone kind of liked, and I'll kind of go just run through the games real quick because I thought it was really interesting. UNLV seemed to be a pick against California. A lot of people like that particular ball game. I think a lot of people think that Billy Napier's Florida squad's playing really, really well. They're willing to give the 14 against Tulane. I'm just speaking personally here, man.
Yeah, because what happened to them at the end of the year? They were terrible.
I know. Indiana plus the 7.5, I think is that line's just strange to me. I thought it'd be closer to 10, so I thought that was interesting. And Indiana, of course, they finally got their chance to get in. Now they can really play the big boys, and of course, that's almost like a rivalry game because
they never play, and they're an hour and a half apart.
Exactly. You mentioned Tennessee, Ohio State. I think that's a remarkable game. I think it's going to be unbelievable. Remember when Tennessee at the beginning of the season? I mean, they were just lighting it up. They were a scoring machine. There was something. Now all of a sudden, Tennessee can't find the end zone. So we're going to see what happens against.
Yeah, the Josh Heupel offense is handing off to Sampson 30 times.
Exactly. And so that was really kind of where we went through. And of course, we went through. We were all over Navy, by the way, this past weekend. An easy winner plus the points, even if you took it on the money line. We also had the over in that ball game too. So yeah, we were all over it, and we'll certainly break it down because we're going to do more than just 1 or 2 shows a week because there's so many great bowl games, and we want to make sure you're on the winning side of all these things through K4wins.com, K4wins.com, because we've been on fire all season long. So we'll continue to do that. I feel you, my friend. I am excited. This is the last year of March Madness. Yeah, I'm excited. This is the last year of March Madness.
Get them out of here.
Teams. I don't know why in the hell we're going from 67 or 68 teams to 76 teams. I mean, if we're going to do it, let's, and Mark Ingram, the UAB athletic director, was talking last year. They were talking about doubling it. It was going to double, and people are like, no, listen, even if you doubled it, it's still going to be the least amount of teams getting into the playoff situations out of all the major sports. Everyone else gets in. Hell, you could be under 500 and get in if you're in the NHL or the NBA. You got college basketball teams out there 33-4 not getting in. You got to give them a shot to get in. So I would love it to go one more weekend. You're talking one more bracket buster.
Yeah.
Go ahead and double it. For me to go from 68 to 76 teams is like 8 more teams. Doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't really
just like in Blazing Saddles, Tony. Oh, prairie shit, everybody.
Exactly. Hey, don't forget. Hey, you missed our show. K4 wins here. I missed starting over. We had the flu in the Kurre family. It ran from top to bottom. We're throwing up at church and everything else. We got it all together, my friend. Now getting ready for
this
holidays.
Weekend.
And
we're
now's
gonna
the
bring
time.
it.
Yeah, you don't want to be meeting the man before the holidays. You want to make sure you're getting the envelope, not giving the envelope.
Absolutely.
So make sure K4wins.com, K4wins.com, and I'll look forward to Kai Gregory, of course, from Southern Pursuit staff. He's going to join us for the big show coming up on this Saturday morning from 10:30, 11 o'clock. It's going to be fantastic. I cannot wait to tip a glass to you, my friend, and get ready to the starting lineup this Saturday morning. It's going to be awesome.
Well, to channel Scott Farrell, who we mentioned before, how can I be the man, Tony, when you the man? Yeah.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curre Radio.